If you go to the AQA website, you can download specimen resources. These questions are based on those sorts of resources. Typically for the first question on paper 1, you'll need to list 2 sources you use for your research and then say a little bit more about them. So if you used BBC Bitesize on the web, and you also used your GCSE textbook, and you wrote down BBC Bitesize and GCSE textbook, this wouldn't actually get many marks. You've not been specific enough. You need to write down the title GCSE Science, by the author, in this case A and Other, the date it was published, and then the pages you used, so you've got the full reference. For the website, you'd need the URL www.superscience.experiments. Whatever follows in the URL bar. Fill out everything there is, don't leave anything out. The marking guidance says that these sources should be fully accurate. This would get 1 mark. Number these 2 sources 1 and 2, so that the second bit becomes easier. Usually this sort of question says something like, which of these sources was more useful and why? You need to compare them. So if you say something like, 1 was useful because it explained the theory of how plants grow, and then you said 2 was more useful than 1 because it had a theory and an example experiment, first of all you would get 1 mark because you've described 2 of your sources. You would also get the second mark because you've said 2 was more useful. You've made a comparison between the 2. So to summarise, 1 mark for 2 full references, and then 2 marks for mentioning both of the sources, saying something about them, and then saying which one was more useful. In total, this gives you 3 easy marks to start. For question 2, the specimen papers normally talk about a control variable and a preliminary investigation. So let's take an imaginary scenario where we're looking at seedling growth and the control variable we're choosing is the light level. We need to describe a preliminary investigation and say how these results would help in choosing this control variable. So we could grow seedlings at different light levels and measure how much they grow at, for example, 5 different levels. We'd then pick the level or possibly levels that give the best or easiest to measure growth for the main experiment. This would mean that it would help to avoid measurement errors. We get 1 mark for the light level, and then we get 1 mark for saying grow the seedlings at different levels. We're describing the procedure. And then I think we'd get 1 mark for saying pick the best one that would be the easiest to measure. Okay, we've given a reason why. Maybe saying this would help to avoid measurement errors is a bit of overkill. You may add it or not, I don't know. It depends. The mark schemes do change. Listen to what your teachers say to you. The specimen papers have talked about a control variable and a preliminary experiment. There's a sort of format to this, and it may apply for different sorts of things, for example an interval, the number of readings or repeats. And typically you need to choose a range or one of these other things. You need to describe how you will do this, and then you need to explain why, and these 3 things underlined in red give you 3 marks. I found it's quite hard to get all 3 marks in this question. If you get 2 of these, so that in total you have 5 out of 6 for the first 2 questions, that's great. Next up is question 3. In this question, you have to write a plan for an investigation to test the hypothesis. It's a long question, so they give you some help. There are 5 bullet points that guide you. They'll say the following. You need to include the equipment you will use, how you will use it, the measurements you will make with that equipment, how you will make it a fair test, and finally a risk assessment. As you complete each one of these bullet points, tick them off. That way you know you've covered that bit and you won't miss anything out during the stress of the exam. In order to help my students write a really good method, I encourage them to draw a small diagram and label it. The labels act as a list of equipment that they need to use and act as little hints when writing out the full method. The diagram doesn't have to be super neat. It's just a sketch to help you write your method. For each of the bits of equipment, they need to say what measurements they will make with them, and how they will make those measurements. This covers those first 3 bullet points. The next bullet point is about a fair test and control variables. Many teachers like you to also mention the dependent and independent variables, so it's worth mentioning these as they will be marking them. So you could write something like this. When I measure the seedling length, the dependent variable, with different temperatures, the independent variable, I will keep the following control variables the same. The light level will be the same for all seedlings, measured with a light meter. They will be watered with the same volume of water, measured with the measuring cylinder. The seeds will come from the same packet, so they will be the same type. I've mentioned 3 different control variables here. I think 2 would be okay, but just to be on the safe side, it's worth mentioning 3 different ones. If you only mention one control variable, you will limit your marks. We're on the home stretch now. The risk assessment is the last thing you do. I like to do this in the form of a table where you have the hazard, the dangerous thing, the risk, which is the chance of something going wrong or getting hurt, and then a precaution, either what to do to prevent what happens, or, if it does go wrong, how to take care of it. So a typical hazard in this experiment would be broken sharp glass from the thermometer. The risk would be getting cut with a broken thermometer. The precaution is to ensure that the thermometers you use have the end pieces that stop them rolling off tables, but use a dustpan and brush to clear up any breakages, not your fingers. If you look at question 4 in the specimen papers, it's to do with using your results effectively to get the best possible interpretations. So typically it would say, explain the advantages of sharing or comparing your results with others, and you'd need to say things like, if I share or compare my results, I'll be able to spot mistakes. I could pool my data with other people's to get more reliable evidence, or even I can check to see if my results are repeatable or reproducible by other people. You may be asked things like what values, range and interval, or how many measurements, or other possible methods you chose and why you chose them, and it's important also to try and explain how these would improve your results and what you'd get out of it. It's quite difficult to get all 3 marks in this question, so if you get 2 of them, that's pretty good. And finally you're going to finish paper 1 with question 5. This is actually a very easy question. In the specimen papers, they ask you to draw a table for your results. It's really important you put the column headings in this case the length of seedling and the temperature, and also you add units for both of them. These are 2 easy marks. Well done and good luck with your ISA.